there are people talk about privilege. I think I am, the freedom of consideration of fill in the blank, that's how I define privilege. I was free from worrying about rejection because I had so many data points of not being rejected in the church setting growing up, or in the theater setting, or
because you were
extroverted
pretty and okay.
But yes, also
I get so shallow. I'm like, because you're hot. We get it.
At some point, I heard that there were 9 different types of intelligence, and they're the quick thinkers, and then the slower, deeper thinkers. And I'm a quicker thinker. But I had a friend in college when I learned about it, and she was a slower, deeper thinker. And she would be the type that would like take weeks to write an essay, right? Like do an outline and then go back in and do short paragraphs and then go back in and fill everything in. And I couldn't move on to the next paragraph until I finished the first. Yeah. And then I learned about it's essentially just learning styles, which means different brains.
Wait,
right?
So there's fast and slow, but there's 5 more?
No, there's 7 more than that.
What?
Yeah. But think about it. Like, I wasn't a good standardized test taker. And I knew other people that were good standardized test takers because I could make a lot of the time, like 2 or 3 options make sense in the gray. And I knew other friends that were like, no, like I have a photographic memory and I read it and it's black and white and that's all that there is. And I would be like, you don't take every option to the nth degree quickly and then get frustrated and then move on and then have to go back. Apparently not.
Oh my God, I think maybe we have the same.
Maybe we have the same brain.
Maybe we have like the same wing or something. maybe I have your wing. I don't know how it works. I'm just making shit up. That's fascinating. Yeah, I think, do you have trouble, can you like clock a black and white thinker pretty quickly? Mm-hmm. What are some things that you've noticed that classify a black and white thinker? Because I feel like I'm like this too.
Oh, interesting. I think a black and white thinker doesn't default to like flexible as much as a different type of thinker.
Yeah.
For example, you said be here at 8:45, and if I was a black and white thinker, I would think no matter what, 8:45. And you said, oh, come closer to 9. And I'm thinking, okay, great. I'm going to come closer to 9 rather than, no, I need to be the podcast guest and it's 8:45. And if she wraps early, right? So it's just
interesting.
You think to the nth degree of, like, no, that's what she said. There's no flexibleness as a default.
Yeah, sure.
Or you don't default, like, assume the best. Or I call it round up. You don't round up as naturally. I'm not saying you can't learn it, but if someone's more wired that way, like we start at 9 a.m. That's it. Okay, well, what if someone has to drop their kid off before they get to work and they every day are going to get in at 9:05? Nope, 9 a.m. Figure it out.
And yeah, sure.
Yeah,
because it's like you almost can't take in context in situations. Mm-hmm. Like you almost can't absorb the context. Yeah. That's so interesting. I agree. I think also it's in the same vein as context and flexible. It's almost like if you propose a different version of something, you can almost see them kind of like like, I don't know, malfunction a little bit because they can't almost see it. Yeah. It's so interesting.
Even sitting down, I feel black and white right now because we didn't officially start. It was a soft start. So I'm like, oh, okay, we've started.
And now we have to turn it on.
And now,
of course.
I didn't do that. I didn't know. I just sat in the chair and now we're talking.
Yeah.
So I think it's sometimes that comes more naturally to people, and sometimes it's like, oh, okay, it's not going to be a hard start. It's a soft start, and I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't expect that. So how am I going to react?
Oh, interesting. Maybe I should tell people it's a soft start then. Do you think so?
Maybe.
I've always been like, I think it's just easier just to talk. I always think it's so weird when you're like, hello. Well, thank you for joining me on this podcast. Today I have, and I'm just staring into your eyes while I talk about your resume. I just feel like that's so strange. Well, and I prefer a flow.
I've never done an in-person interview, but because I feel like I know you so well, I also just feel like we're hanging. I don't feel like, oh, I'm on a podcast.
But that's my favorite podcasts are when they're just hanging.
Talking.
Yeah. Personally. So I'm like, well, why would I not makes me want to listen?
But I don't watch podcasts, so I don't know if my favorite podcasts, because I just listen, so I don't know if this is what they're doing. So it just feels like a hang. Like, is this environment what makes the most approachable podcasts approachable? Is sitting in armchairs with people that are already comfortable with each other?
As opposed to,
I guess you don't know me, you DM me and are like, hey, come on my podcast. And I come and I'm like, hi, good to meet you.
I mean, I did that. So far, it's been people that I'm friends with for the most part. But I did Cassidy Pope a few weeks ago, and I did not know her prior to. Like, I had friends that knew her and blah, blah, blah. Like, large circles, I guess. But I'd never met her before. And so we just talked out there for a little bit, came in here, started recording and just kind of chatting. And I think the reason I started the podcast was because my job is so solitary. I've put myself in this box of kind of being very autonomous, which I enjoy, but the autonomy has then lent itself towards
loneliness.
Solitude. Yeah, a little bit of loneliness.
Yeah,
my dude, like it's yeah. So I was like, what can I do that I enjoy? And I love talking to people. I don't love like hosting a panel. I feel like there are podcasts where people will sit and they'll like be like, so tell me what you blah, 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 blah. And I have questions for you because I know that if you and I will just go back and forth.
You took notes? I know. I'm like, are we even talking about things that people would find interesting?
I don't know, but I do. Like when I'm listening to a podcast and it's two people and they're just talking about their life and like there's some obviously questions involved and blah, blah, blah. That's what I find interesting because I like a two-sided conversation, not like I can just like read someone's interview if I want to listen to someone answer questions. That's my thing. And as someone who enjoys talking to people, that's what I wanted. That's why I'm doing this. Yeah. So I don't know. But okay, wait. So since I don't even know where I'm going to begin this podcast.
Okay, wait.
We just kind of like very slowly got into it. I feel like we should talk about what you do. Like, give me like your job title and like a general idea of what you do as a job.
Okay.
This is important.
Okay. So I lead human resources at a global company, which is what I say online.
I love it.
But I do. That's my full-time job. And what that means day to day is supporting the C-suite, which is the chief officers. So I'm going to talk like someone's never heard of an organization structure.
Okay. Treat us like we're stupid, baby.
Please. So
pretend, Amy.
At the top,
just pretend.
At the top, no, most organizations are hierarchical. And so I am leading the human resource function. And so a lot of people have experienced HR negatively because they were told that they couldn't make more money. And then they found out that someone that has their exact same job title makes way more money than them. And sometimes people are told you can't move up in the company because for whatever reason, but then someone else does. So people feel this distrust. And so what I do day to day actively is support senior leaders. So from a department like the head of marketing and then her head of brand marketing and head of performance marketing, right? You have like multiple functions in one department. So I actively support the people that are like the spearheader of a function. And then randomly I'll get pulled into, hey, Amy, can you talk? Because I'll say in front of the whole organization, if you want to talk to me, and you can talk to me. And similar to therapy, unless you're hurting yourself or hurting someone else, it can stay anonymous. And I've backed that up. I've been at my current organization for over 2 years. So it's a lot of supporting people and anticipating need and doing all the back end work like a 401k audit or we do pay equity audits. So there's some, right, like tactical HR stuff. But what I like to talk about online is really how to advocate for yourself. And then I try to act as an advocate for people. So for example, Courtney, if you were a VP of marketing and you wanted to be the chief marketing officer,
always,
I would say, great. So CEO is going to give you an offer and I'm not going to talk to you about it, but feel free to come to me if you need support negotiating. Right. And so I might not proactively say that, but if they come to me and say, hey, I got my offer and it feels low. Okay, let's talk it through. So I'm not going against the company and I'm not actively it's very much a balance of I support the company's needs, which is managing risk. And people don't like to talk about that. And then I support the employees' needs. And both of them work together when you work in a state like California and you have to have pay equity, for example. But you can also have someone behind the curtain like me that's like, okay, let's be this is how you can advocate for yourself. So
yeah.
I
like that. It's almost my ex, when we had a therapist and she was a couples therapist and she's still my therapist. She was a couples therapist that we got through a friend. And she would talk to him and she would talk to me.
Separately.
Okay. Not together. And she would never bring up something that, like what I said to her about him and what he said about me to her was always in confidence. Like she never was like, oh, well, he said this or whatever. But she also knew the perspective of both people. And I was like, what a genius way to navigate a couple's relationship. Because I can come to her and I feel fully honest and fully vulnerable that she's not going to go give my deepest fear to him. She's going to help me resolve that fear, knowing what his intentions might be and vice versa. I feel like that's kind of like you're not really on either team. You just want the company to work the best way it possibly can. So you're not going to be like, actually, the company said this about you as an employee or the employee said this, whatever. They're feeling this way, but you can kind of help navigate both sides while having the intentions of both parties in mind.
Yeah.
Fucking genius. I love it. I love it.
I know. Yeah.
Do you feel like most people who work in human resources or run human resources departments, do you feel like they have that same mentality? Or do you feel like if you can, all humility aside, do you feel like you are an anomaly in that respect?
What a question. Well, I don't think I've met enough. I don't have a sample set.
We'll do a study after this. Yeah.
But I will say, based on the amount of people that have come to me saying or sharing their negative experiences, I would say I do feel like an anomaly.
Yeah.
I do feel like an anomaly in the sense that I studied the psychology of human behavior in the business setting. At Vanderbilt down the street.
Small plug.
Yeah. But really it's a one-of-a-kind major, and I would take classes. I took a class called small group behavior, and they would put a prompt in the middle of the table. And this was when I'm 20 years old and my brain is learning how the brain works in relation to other people. And so down to, you can have up to 12 people and that's a certain dynamic. But the second that you bring in a 13th person, the dynamic completely shifts. So when and when you're building teams, that's relevant. When companies grow past 150, it stops feeling like a community. That's why certain companies will build campuses. And so that no more than 150 people can work in an office building. Smart. Because it feels too big. So you have a dinner table of 12 and then someone wants to invite their friend. If the hostess might not know why she doesn't want the 13th and 14th people to come, right? Yeah. But it's this, if you've been throwing dinner parties forever and you know that you only want 12 people, there's science to it. And so I think it's not an active obsession, but it's a consistent active interest in what is the best way that people can connect with each other and be productive and make a big impact. And so I don't know many heads of HR at companies, but I do feel flattered when people say, I've never met someone in HR. And I didn't climb the traditional HR ladder either. And so I got brought on because of my non-traditional approach, because I would look at a policy and go, that doesn't make any sense. Let's change it. Or I would say, hey, staff, if you see anything in the handbook that you want changed, bring it to me and I'll change it or tell you why we can't change it. And so I think that taking away the stuffiness of, oh, we can't talk about it, it just builds trust and rapport and respect and all of the great things when,
for sure,
like, what does HR even do? Right.
Yeah,
and so
of
I'm
course.
like, this is what we do. I'll show you. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to know? What would help you do your job best?
What is the normal pipeline? Is it like a bit more of a business background for people in HR?
I think, you know, you can have pre-med or pre-law. So mine would have been considered like pre-HR. A lot of my friends went into human capital consulting, like the big consulting companies, like Deloitte has a really big human capital program. So if two companies merge or a company acquires another company, consultants would come in deeply rooted in the knowledge of, okay, well, this team needs to be structured like this, and let's do personality and brain assessments on this group of people and figure out how to, I mean, a lot of the time you think consultants, I've never been a consultant like for a big consulting company, but a lot of
You've been a consultant for me plenty of times. On a personal level.
Thank you. But I think the pipeline, people ask me all the time, how do I move up in HR? How do I get into it? I really like talking about transferable skills because I think a traditional pipeline might be starting as an assistant or a coordinator or a human resources business partner. So how I support one group of people, I support senior leaders. Someone might start supporting all of the executive assistants at a big company. So their job is to connect with and make sure that all executive assistants across the company feel supported. So then you might have 30 HR BPs, human resource business partners, and
Thank you.
That's your group.
That's so fascinating because it's like, I don't know. I feel like the best background for someone who, in my brain, having not really worked too much in the corporate world, I dabbled.
That is it is interesting that I do something that is not really relevant to what you do.
But it is.
What do you mean?
Well, because it's hard. I would not be able to exist. I would not be able to make money in any sort of creative field without the corporate aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because there will always be like a big business behind something, whether I'm doing brand deals, whether I'm, pitching my movie to a studio, as I do so often.
Yeah.
But the studio is corporate. These big agencies are corporate. Even
I think moving up in corporate it's just people.
100%.
I'll say corporate tip. It's just a communication tip.
Mm-hmm.
It's just communicating.
It's just people.
Yeah. It's just people.
You've always been seemingly so curious about people, which I think is why you're one of my favorite people to talk to. Because I feel like when you ask me a question, I feel like you actually want to know. Do you get that? Do people tell you that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, when I was in college, it's so funny. So I was homeschooled. As you know, I was homeschooled until my sophomore year of high school, and I walked into this massive auditorium and I thought, I have to make friends. So I need to remember people's names, and I like when people ask me questions, so I'm going to ask them questions. And the amount of people I met that were so different from me fascinated me. And so then I went to community college, and then I transferred. So again, I started community college and thought, okay, this is a whole new world. I want to get to know people. And then I transferred, and as a junior, my whole life felt like I need to be the initiator. I need to be the one that makes the first move. And at college, I looked up like how to memorize things, right? You can train yourself really quickly. And the first party I went to in college, I remembered over 35 people's names.
Damn.
And the whole night I was just saying people's names. And I would go into the lunch hall at Vanderbilt, and I would find people that were sitting alone, and I would approach them smiling, telling myself well, if they're sitting alone in a public space, it's not like they're outside on a bench far removed. They're in a bustling area. And so I would ask to sit down with people, and I would it was all random, thousands of students. I would meet the head cheerleader or the head football player or the head of some committee that I'd never heard of. And I would get to know people, and I just always have been fascinated. But someone that I met we'd go to parties together, and she drunkenly would say, it's gonna feel like Amy's interviewing you, but she's not fake. And I would be so offended. Like, do I come off that way?
It's so funny.
But now that I, in a very short amount of time, have public feedback from posting online so much, I'll get comments like, you're trying too hard. You don't come off authentic. You seem so fake. Oh my gosh, and thank God I have really thick skin and just read it and think that sucks that someone would spend their time like dissing someone. That helps my engagement. Like, thank you for the comment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say throughout my life, I've gotten people, like the feedback from people has either been, oh my gosh, Amy's so interested, or like, why is Amy so interested? Like, what's behind it?
Oh, so it's been, that's their own trigger.
Exactly.
Shit,
like
that may
to
be,
me, I'm like, okay, well, I only know my motive. I only know why I'm asking you.
Yeah.
But maybe share how we know each other, because we're clearly very comfortable, and you've already brought up your ex. Like,
oh yeah.
The reason why we're so comfortable is because we met each other 4.5 years ago. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Because we were together 4 years. So yeah, it's been 4.5 years.
And at the time we were dating cousins.
We were dating, not our cousins. We were dating men that were cousins. Oh, I'm from West Virginia. You got to clarify. Yes, our boyfriends. Yeah, because you guys weren't engaged yet.
No.
They were cousins, correct.
They were cousins. And we're still friends.
Kissing cousins.
Yes.
And we're still friends.
And we're still friends.
And that's the beautiful thing about life. Yeah, good job. Maybe you should take it with them.
No.
Just laying out context. But yeah, do you know where that comes from for you? Like, if you had to, like, gun to your head, kind of psychoanalyze, because I feel like it goes against like the norm almost, because we're very, like, the cheerleaders hang out together and the football players hang out together, and these people we tend to default to almost being scared of people who are different than us, or almost being scared of things that we don't understand, but you lean into it. If you had to psychoanalyze it, do you have any idea where that might come from for you?
I always like going off of what comes to mind first.
Yeah, tell me.
So what first came to mind was, I'm one of 6 kids, and every Sunday my parents would sit in the front of our Suburban, and they would lecture us on looking adults in the eyes, and we would say yes ma'am and yes sir, and we would talk in full sentences to adults and how important it was to essentially be enjoyable to adults around us, because there were so many of us. It could have been chaos, and instead the feedback my parents received were, your kids are so well behaved, but I would be looking around and the adults would be talking about interesting things and the kids would be chaos all around me. I'm talking about like the church lobby, right? Sure. It's, I mean, you've been into a church lobby, like an evangelical Christian church in America, and it's picking up your kids and can we go to lunch, and it's madness. And I would just be very fascinated by adult conversations, because it was more interesting to me than, I don't know, playing with a ball outside and talking about sports. And so I was always drawn to, in the most pure way possible, like mature conversations. That came to mind. And then I grew up hearing from both my parents, we are all equal in the eyes of God. Like, that was a very, like, we are not better than anyone. No one is better than us. We are all equal. And that instilled in me truly like a respect for every single person. And
yeah, sure.
The third thing is, I got a job the week I turned 16 at Starbucks. And I think if you work in any service industry for any amount of time, but I did for a long time, I got to just kind of psychoanalyze the different, like, what else are you doing except thinking thoughts in your head while you're making coffee for 6 to 8 hours. I'm just listening to people's conversations on the other side of the bar. And then I'm dealing with my coworkers, and it's interesting, right? Because I feel like, oh, that's just my wiring. But I put myself in and then was put into situations where I guess I chose to just dive a little deeper. But my mom and I are very similar, and she is known for asking a ton of questions. And so I think in my childhood, she might have a friend over and they would sit on the couch and talk for hours. And my mom was always the question asker. So I think it's nature. I think I'm very similar to her in that way. But I think
it was also modeled for you in a way. Yeah. And it sounds like there was also a little bit of a reward to it. Like you had to, like when you were homeschooled and you were brought into school, if you asked people questions and you got to know them, you learned really quickly that asking people about themselves and being interested in people, they would like you. Like that's the capital that you get back is, and I think kids are scared of the rejection maybe. Yeah. And so they don't learn that reward early enough on for it to really kind of cultivate this curiosity that I imagine is why you're so insightful now too.
Yeah. And that makes me think, I think there are people talk about privilege. I think I am, the freedom of consideration of fill in the blank, that's how I define privilege. I was free from worrying about rejection because I had so many data points of not being rejected in the church setting growing up, or in the theater setting, or
because you were
extroverted
and okay.
But yes, also
I get so shallow. I'm like, because you're hot.
No, but I think
sure.
I think I'll talk to girlfriends and we'll go deep and we'll get vulnerable. And I was picked on for being too skinny, and they were picked on for being fat, and that's
so why I have a friend who got made fun of for, she would say, for being rich, which I was like, as someone who grew up very poor, I was like, there's no way.
Right.
There's no way. I'm sure your friends who were overweight when they were a kid were like, there's no way you got made fun of for being skinny.
Yeah.
But you're like, it happened.
No, I had multiple friends who developed eating disorders, and their parents said, you're not allowed to hang out with Amy anymore. My very best friend. It was very traumatic. I was 13. And I couldn't talk about that in high school or college, or even now on a public podcast, and it really, that's not the same. Struggling with being too skinny is not the same as, right? Because society interacts with both of those issues differently. And so I was very aware of how easy life was for me. Like I'm very justice oriented, not because I've experienced so much on the one end of the spectrum where life is hard, but because life has been easy. And I wrestle with why. But not like, why is life so hard? But like, why? It's just, if we're all equal, it's the big questions. Like, why was I born in America? Why was I born into a 2-parent home that they're still married and happy? Why am I so happily married when I have multiple friends getting divorced? And some of it's life choice, some of it's things you can't choose. But I think a lot of it, going back to your original question, I think a lot of it for me is I'm very privileged in so many ways, down to being extroverted and liking being social. That the world is set up to support extroverts. Corporate is set up to support extroverts. And so I'm very aware of basically why life is easier for me and why it's not. But it's very interesting. It's very delicate to talk about because it's very uncomfortable to talk about. Your friend being rich and being picked on, you're like, can I switch problems?
But I think that's the difference. But it's really easy for me to be like, we all have our shit. Like everything is so subjective. Everything in the world is so subjective. And I would never think that just because society deems my problem of not having money more objectively hard or problematic or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean that the person who didn't have that experience had an easier life. Like for me, that's the difference between black and white and gray thinking, right? Is I'm able to be like, oh no, that was just you don't know any better. I don't know any better. That's just our subjective experiences. But I like this idea of almost like the privilege of being able to be curious, like the privilege of curiosity. There was this, don't cancel me, but there's this like Shia LaBeouf interview that he did a while back. And he was at I want to say he started, this is why I need like a fact check. He started like some sort of theater program for kids in like Compton and areas that may have lower socioeconomic status in California. And I remember he was talking to someone and he was like, we're sitting here and we're having these conversations about life and just like existential crises and blah, 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 blah. Like that is such a privilege because these kids have to go to work at 16 to pay their bills. That's what their brain, that's what's taking up the capacity of their brain is how do I make money? How do I get out of this gang? He was talking about like different, just the trials and tribulations of things that people don't have the privilege to be existential, don't have the privilege to have a fucking podcast. We're talking about the privilege of being curious. Like it's dicey because,
well, if your basic needs aren't met, like the people that say money doesn't buy happiness. Well, I just spent a week with my husband's family in a house that could fit all of us, 10 adults and 5 kids. How does money not buy happiness in that sense?
Yeah.
And it's people that have money that say, it's just the disregard for the trials. Like, oh, you focus on what really matters. I'm like, well, what really matters is paying bills and eating.
Yes.
And not processed toxic food.
Yes.
Right? And so it really is, yeah, I mean, we could stay on this for a long time and talk about
for forever.
Yeah.
I know. We could pick any one topic and I feel like you and I could talk about it for 6 hours without taking a breath. It's freaking absurd. Okay, wait, let me ask you, because I feel like, again, we will just go on and on. So I had some questions. I don't even know why I'm bringing this out because I definitely have them memorized.
You look official with the notepad.
With my little Target, potentially Dollar General notebook. Okay, one, I have some questions, like, that's probably that you might have even already answered on your TikTok, but I had some of those. But I wanted to talk about, so before we dive into those, your social media journey, because last time we talked, I think last time I saw you IRL, you were talking about a podcast or some way to get out this knowledge that you've acquired, almost is what it felt like to me. I'll speak, as someone who has spoken to you. As my friend. Yes, but like you have wisdom to share, and I, in those moments, was like, absolutely, you have to, whatever means it may be. What was just the quick Cliff Notes version of what made you want to start the Hack Your HR page? I know we've talked briefly about it, but I'm just curious, like, what was that journey for you to being like, I need to put something out, I have something to give, there's a hole I need to fill. What was that thought process?
The pandemic hit and I downloaded TikTok. Classic. And my For You page was business leaders, motivational speakers, the Tony Robbins, Gary Vee, right? Mel Robbins. And I would see here and there people talk about HR, and it was comedy, or it was very niche specific to recruiting or resume help. But I saw a white space and I thought, well, I'm not a regular HR girl. I'm a cool HR girl.
Yes.
And my Instagram was private. I had 0 selfies on my phone. Meaning I didn't use my phone to capture myself. Like
you weren't pursuing any sort of like influencer agenda or like personal branding, anything at the
nothing.
time. Yeah.
Nothing. I was laser focused on just my work in real life with the people that I was working with. And so I saw this white space and thought, whew, that's a lot of work, because you were growing and you were you, Courtney, were growing and very consistent, and your setup, your lighting was amazing. And I just, the thoughts I had, right? Like, Courtney has such great lighting and her makeup is so good and she's so funny and she's doing this all the time. And you were a few people that I knew that really exemplified success in the social media space. And then You asked for you asked for the Cliff Notes version, but
no,
I don't know if I'm
much better.
Yeah,
give me the version that gives me the most compliments. Actually.
Okay, great.
That's what I meant to say.
I'll finish with multiple people anchoring me as having any kind of respectable clout online because you follow me.
And look at me just doing good in the world. Jesus.
And then my older brother is Warren LENTZ, and he co-founded Sway House and worked with a bunch of top TikTokers, and I would go over to their house and interact with them and see really just what not like what it looked like behind the scenes, because they were like 19, 20, 21-year-olds truly influencers, but I would look around or talk to people and think, oh my gosh, this is so approachable, doable. I just need to press post. Mm-hmm. And so I got together with Warren and said, hey, what do I do? And he said, post 3 times a day for a year. And then one of my best friends owns a talent management company called Portrait, and she represents mostly Gen Z talent from diverse backgrounds. And I said, what should I do? And she said, post 3 times a day. Like, and she gave me the best compliment. She said, essentially, I would bet money on you. And that was, and I thought, oh, what do you mean? And she was like, if you post 3 times a day, like, I would bet money on you. Mm-hmm. Like, great success. And I'm like, I don't even know what success looks like for what I want to do. But what I can control is my process, which is posting. And what I can't control is my follower count or my engagement count. And so my youngest sister got pregnant last year, entered motherhood as a single mom. And so every weekend I was with her last year in 2022. And then when her baby, my niece, was born, I spent as much time as I possibly could with her. And then January hit, and I thought, I love my sister, I love my niece, and I really want to do something with my free time for me. And that's when I got together with my brother and with Erica with Portrait, and I just decided to do it. And so I thought, okay, well, it's a lot easier to respond to people than it is to create an original piece of content. Like, I have no idea how you are so productive in creating original content, because I started with just stitching people. I would scroll my For You page and save things that I wanted to comment on. And so for the first couple months, I feel like all I did was stitch. So
it's great.
Right. And so
it's such an easy access point as well.
So easy.
And it takes it was a really slow start for me because I didn't know what kind of content I even wanted to create. Yeah. And I think, not that this has to be about giving people advice to start their social media page, but I think, whatever is the easiest access point and whatever makes it the most, attainable. And that's so easy.
I like
to
the
do.
word approachable.
Approachable. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and you and I grew up in our early 20s, I think. I don't know when Instagram got started, but in the era post Facebook, but in Instagram where it was feed oriented, where it was so permanent to post a photo, right? On Facebook, you dumped 30 pictures from your night, and then Instagram comes and then it's just a feed. There's no albums from your nights. And so it was so, I just felt pressure.
So much pressure.
On
a singular thing. You had to have the right caption because you couldn't change it.
And then your grid needed to look good.
Oh, the aesthetics had to be aestheticing. Yeah.
Yes. And over filtered. And you and I have talked about our acne journeys.
Yeah.
And I had clear skin until 24, and then cystic, painful acne, and we still struggle with it.
Oh, it's a daily fun thing.
Yeah. And so there was something really freeing about TikTok. And the advice I got from my brother, right? But just to emphasize, I got advice from someone that worked with dozens of the most influential social media content creators in the world. Yeah. And for him to say, act like you're FaceTiming your best friend. Act like you're FaceTiming Courtney, right? like act like you're FaceTiming someone that you feel really comfortable with, and don't talk like it's so simple. It's not easy, but it is simple. Just just talk as if you're talking. Like, I don't feel like I'm on a podcast because you did a great job in making it feel like I'm just hanging out with you so I can be vulnerable and whatever.
Love.
But FaceTime your best friend and treat TikTok like your Instagram story to your close friends.
Yes.
And then my strategic brain started picking up on, oh my God, why did that go viral? Okay, let me look at the first 2 seconds. And then I would read something, or a friend would send me an article, and I would think, okay, I shared the story first, and then I ended with, the bottom line or the takeaway. I need to start with the takeaway and then tell the story.
Yep.
Or save this if, right? Like all the kitschy, follow me for more. I'm like, I don't like follow me for more. Stick around. Like, I like stick around.
Yeah.
I don't like link in bio. I'm like, how else do you say link in bio? Like profile. And so there's just like a constant calibrating. But if you're committed to what's in your control, I always think about that.
Yes. And this is where your fascination with people is so beneficial, because I would imagine, and I'm sure that you take things personally because you're a human being, but when something does go viral, I try to put on that curiosity of people brain and be like, I wonder what made people like resonate with this, as opposed to why don't they like me? It is this like, like have the curiosity instead of taking things personally is the only way to approach social media in my brain. You'll go crazy if you don't.
Yeah. Another, this is like such a plug for my brother.
Plug.
I know. Another thing that Warren said, he loves you, by the way. I think he called you the Courtney.
I mean, I will be going by the Courtney from now on. Please, everyone write it down. I will not be answering to anything else.
Change your handle.
Oh, absolutely. It'll be on my tombstone.
He said post and ghost.
Yeah.
And
great.
to take every positive comment with the same dopamine hit as a negative comment with a cortisol hit. So a comment cannot make my day.
Yeah.
And it can't ruin my day. And it only matters when it matters. So if I post something and I'm getting tons of hate, I'm like, this is when it matters. I'm not going to go look. But I am going to go look when it's not a hot topic post. But if it's people asking me questions, I do look in my comments. And I think my dad's the mayor of my small hometown. It's very small.
Love it.
He makes a big impact. And I've watched him campaign, and the amount of hate he would get, and encouraging him, don't look at the comments. But I would look at the comments as his daughter campaign manager, because I had political experience.
Yeah.
But this was years ago when I would truly train my nervous system not to get defensive, reading really ugly, nasty comments about my dad, who I have a great relationship with. I have a lot of respect for. So from from my young adult life, I really did start building up thick skin. But I really try, if I see something hateful, I try to tell myself, essentially, like, think about what they're doing. Like, is this person alone, feeling lonely, feeling angry, and taking it out on me? Probably.
For sure. Or
you clearly didn't even read my caption or watch the full video, which is like, that's the root of your comment. Yep. So it's just, I don't think you can, I'm human. So of course I take things personally sometimes, but I don't think as much as the average person, because I've put myself in a position to just get feedback.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you bust yourself wide open, it's almost like you're susceptible to it. And you have to figure out a way to.
And you are vulnerable online in a different way than I am. But you're saying, look at my sense of humor, which is like people's favorite way to connect with one another is, do we get each other? Do we vibe?
Sure. Yeah.
Do I find you funny? Do I want you to be a middle at a dinner party? Like, where am I going to seat you? So for you to put that out and for someone to say anything negative is like, this is the core of who I am, and you hate it.
Well, and I've talked before about, and you and I have talked about, like, what is my niche? Like, what is the through line between my shit? But I'm nicheless.
Yeah.
No, but I do think I try to, with most of the content that I do, I try to be very vulnerable about something and see if it's relatable. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it gets like 400 views and I'm like, all right, maybe I'm the only one who does that. Got it. Duly noted. But I feel like my thing is I want to make people feel less alone, whatever, broad strokes, and feel seen in certain things. So I feel like the hard part for me is when I do something and it just feels very vulnerable. But I mean, there's no way around it because I in order for me to make other people feel seen, I have to expose all the parts of me. And it can be very rewarding, but it also can be, it's hard. But everyone has their own plight. I mean, this is what you do for a living. So it's also very vulnerable for you to be talking about HR stuff and have someone be like, that's a bad idea, or that's a bad way to do this, or you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. I would imagine I would be like, oh my God, wait, this is what I do though. Like, should I not be doing this? Like, this is what I actually am implementing in my day job. And they're saying someone's offended by it or someone feels hurt by it. Like,
I really pride myself on being, and remove all like political things aside, I really pride myself on being tolerant of differences. I have to be. I have to support if two people are in conflict, right, at my company or in life, but let's call it my company, I have to provide equal support. That's my job. So outside of that, I have friends who have opinions that I vehemently oppose, that I'm like, but it's never bothered me if someone thinks differently or believes differently. And I think that is rooted in we're all equal and we all have different backgrounds and right? It all comes back to, I think, how your brain developed, right? If your brain develops between 0 and 2, 80%, and then the last 20% is between age 2 and 25, the first 2 years of your life, like what fed into how your brain works. And I bring that up because I don't know what was said around me like my whole life, but I have a really big capacity for difference of opinion or difference of belief or difference of approach or not a whole lot of personal preferences, because I know that other people have strong personal preferences, right? And so I think if someone's commenting or someone's spewing hate, I just don't relate to that. I just don't spend my time that way. So it's easier for me, I think, to look at that and go, okay,
yeah,
that sucks for you because
yeah,
that didn't impact me. Unless it's like, I mean,
of course,
I can think of like 2 comments where I'm like,
yep.
Wow, I hate that.
Yep. What I said this on Cassie's podcast. For me, it's like a questioning of character.
Yes.
That I can sometimes question myself.
Yes.
That I'm like, don't look at me that way. Don't see me in that. No, like I'm already working on that. Yeah. So shut up.
I was processing with Dom, my husband,
Shout out.
the other week, and I was trying to figure out why something bothered me so much. And he said, well, you are obsessed with being authentic all the time. And you are scared of not being authentic for even a second. And so that shows up in, you're like, oh my gosh, I love your jeans. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. And if I know that they are $500 jeans, I want to authentically share that I didn't spend $500 on the jeans. And so that I can take that to, if I post a video that is representative of what I think or believe, but that could benefit from 10 more minutes of context, but I don't have the time to post the 10 minutes. And then I'm misperceived or I'm perceived very accurately. And I just could post the extra context. That's what bothers me, if anything. It's not you're awful. It's, wow, I would never want to work with you. And I think, okay, well, you just don't have all the information.
Yeah.
But I have to tell myself that instead of, oh my gosh, they don't want to, like, I don't care.
Yeah.
But it's figuring out, well, what do you choose to care about? Yeah.
And with the internet, it's so funny because, like, especially when you're doing comedy stuff or when you're giving advice or explanations, I'll speak for myself. If I say one word differently, it could be offensive. It could be misconstrued. It could be taken a different way than if I said something different that I actually meant in that way. And same with advice, same with like if you just miss one little bit of things on the internet, they only have that. So it's like they hold on to that and they're like, but what about this thing?
Yeah.
And you're like, I just didn't have enough room in the header to put that one word, but come on, like give me the benefit of the doubt. And the internet never does.
No. Yeah. I posted something and said, start with the headline, end with the punchline. And people were like, that's not even what punchline means.
Of course.
I just thought, I use punchline all the time in the way that I used it in my video. And it's great for engagement, but does she even know, and I'm just sitting there like, great, this is helpful to me. But also I just learned something that is not what punchline means. But I'll hear people say it in regular life and I'm like, well, it kind of does. Like if people are saying it in the way that is being generally recognized and understood, right? If I say, okay, but the punchline is you're fired. Yeah. Which I would never say while firing someone, but you're going to understand what punchline means in that. Right. Yes. So yeah, the internet is ruthless.
It's an interesting place to exist. Okay. So we'll do clean down. I feel like we're getting towards the end of it. So I'll do 2.
Okay.
These are the first one was less selfish and the second 2 are very selfish. So I'll do the second 2.
Okay.
For people, we talked about this a little bit, like a more creative, autonomous field versus a corporate go to the office business. And that's such a, we don't live in a binary world where those are the 2 options, but the hiring process for a creative field versus a more corporate environment is, I'm sure there are a lot of similarities, but for me, can we say that Dom's a singer?
Yeah.
Okay. So your husband is an artist, and so he works in a very creative field, and I'm sure he's bringing on people, and I'm also bringing on random people for different projects and blah, 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 blah. And I feel like 2 things. One, it can get, it's just, there's the lines between personal and business or personal and work are very blurred in a more creative field. And they can be in corporate as well. But if you aren't like going to the office every day or like logging on to your work or these are the business hours, I feel like obviously the lines can be very blurred. So when you're hiring someone, I feel like I have a tendency to want to hire someone that I want to spend time with, that I want to be able to have a conversation with, that I'm friends with. But then the dynamic always can sometimes shift. So I feel like best case scenario, we'll talk specifically about for a creative field. When you're in a creative field and you're hiring someone and you want to hire friends, you want to hire people that can kind of, because it's also so up and down. So you want someone who you feel like you can personally be up and down with as well. How would you recommend, or what advice would you give in hiring friends? What friends can you bring on? What red flags do you look for before or during? Or should you just not do it in general? What's your opinion?
I think specific to the question of when do you hire a friend and what does it look like, you have to have clear expectations. This is very simple, but I have seen it not implemented. If you have clear expectations, then you have room to have the friendship feel to it. And what I mean is, let's say you're hiring, I don't even know who you would hire for, like actors and producers and set designers. And so you would have a statement of work. You would outline, this is exactly what I expect of you. And then they would agree to it. Right. So I think a lot of times in a creative field, you're thinking, oh, I just need you to come and do my makeup. But what time do they have to get there? If you need them at 9, they should know that they probably need to set up. So they should be there at 8:30. But if you just say, oh yeah, we're going to start at 9 and you can come and do 3 people's makeup and it's going to be really chill and I'll pay you $1,000. I would recommend arrival time, 8:15, be set up by 8:45 bring your own, right? Like,
Yep.
I'm not going to have a work, like you outline absolutely you proactively anticipate how they could not show up well, and then really over index on it. And so I think someone might say, well, you're doing extra work. Yeah, you're doing extra work, because they might, however your brain needs them to show up, you communicate that. I'm going to pay you half up front and then reconfirm 24 hours before and then pay you the other half day of, like, setting play by play. This is how I work. Do you want to work with me? And so putting it in writing. And if you ever have to be formal with informal people, saying the obvious. Hey, I know that we're friends, and I know that it's just, I throw in a passive word. I know it's just a few hours of doing makeup, but I have everybody I work with sign this so that it's all black and white, just in case we forget something.
Yeah.
And so it's just naming out loud, this is how I like to work. This is my boundary, because boundaries don't have to do with other people. They have to do with you. So this is my boundary. I like outlining everything. So here you go. Right. It's simple, but I promise you, people do not. If you can nail the basics, you'll succeed. So with hiring friends, if you can nail the basics of very clear, anticipating what might go wrong and solving for it expectations, it is as simple as a contract.
Yeah.
I
feel like for me sometimes too, and maybe this is bad, but I will sometimes apologize for the formality to save the friendship, but use the formality for the business. And not apologize like, I'm so sorry. Just be like, sorry, I know it's annoying to fill this out, blah, 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 but we need it for blah, 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 blah. I really appreciate it. I feel like for me, I almost have to sugarcoat, or not even like pad certain
And see, I think you could
things.
flip that and be excited. Like, okay, I'm so excited because I'm getting a little more formal, and I have an official statement of work, and I have an official contract, and feel free to read every word, and like flip it to, I'm like, my business manager is making me to, I'm owning my formality, because, right, it's all about,
we're legit now.
Yeah.
How exciting is that?
Yes.
Oh my God. Wait, Amy, I love this.
Yeah. Or like, hey, send me an invoice, because I'm doing my own bookkeeping, and that's how my brain works.
Yes.
And so I made an invoice, and I'll send you an invoice, and I'll send you a template for you to use. Like, if I'm worried about how someone might take something, it's, well, how can I benefit them too? Which is going above and beyond, which the feedback that I get is, essentially, you're going to stand out if you go above and beyond. Not, and when looking at a job description, we're not even talking about corporate, but I have a water next to me, right? Like you told, I mean,
it's not a great one, but it is wet.
It's water.
It's pH balance.
Great.
So
but it's I recently read a book, and it said service is a monologue. I want coffee, give me my coffee, right? It's very one way. Okay. Hospitality is a dialogue. And I think if you approach anything in business from that perspective, it's two ways. I need you to send me a formal invoice rather than requesting me on Venmo. Hey, this is my expectation. This is what I need from you. What do you need in return? Do you want me to send you a receipt? Do you want, right? And so it's really simple, but I think the approach can make or break the interaction. And with friends, it's like, don't mix, or like, I've gotten random advice throughout my life, like never mix business with friends or family, or don't lend money or invest money. And I think if you work with friends, are you okay if something were to go wrong on this, like on that project? If you bring in a friend and they disappoint you, is it worth being disappointed in them if they don't show up in that way?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that obviously the hiring of the friends is the easy. It's the when you realize it's not working, and it's the
like
parting of the ways.
I'm not going to ask you to cut my hair, because I'm going to take a wild guess that I would be disappointed with how you cut my hair.
Be so disappointed.
So,
correct.
And if you wanted to hire me to be a podcast editor, you would be wildly disappointed. So it's also, are you doing your friend a disservice by bringing them on, which might have nothing to do with them, but have everything to do with your own wiring and expectations, right? I expect people I work with to operate a certain way. I would not work with a lot of my friends because we might not be work compatible, but we're friend compatible. I mean, you and I have talked about roommates in that regard. Yeah. So I'll end there.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic answer. The looking at it in a positive light is world changing to me, because it's
brand your invoice and contracts.
Because it's so fun, and then especially if you are bringing someone into it, it's like, look, oh my gosh, how cool. Yeah, I love that. Okay, last one. This one's a little more personal, but I feel like it's still like human advice.
Great.
So I remember like years ago, we were sitting out on your porch. And you were on Dom's porch, and we were talking about relationships and love and blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to butcher what you said, but it was something along the lines of, and it's always stuck with me, you just have to decide that day whether or not you choose your partner or to choose your partner. Do you remember this? I'm sure you have thought about it since or whatever, but like it stuck with me so hard because I think sometimes in relationships, romantic relationships or whatever, but mainly romantic relationships, when you're living with someone and you're like creating a life together, I think we get so bogged down sometimes in like the what ifs. And it's like, oh, if you take this job, are we still going to work out? If you know, get this haircut, or if we move to the city together, or whatever it may be, like if we do this thing, what will happen? And it's just like a wasteful worrying. And I liked that idea because it made it so less daunting. It was like, no, just each day you make that decision. And I loved that. You weren't married then. You've now been married coming up on 2 years.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Also very exciting. Now, being a married woman, do you still believe in this take? Is there more nuance to it? Is there less nuance to it? Where are we at with it?
So I think the punchline is you choose your person every day.
Okay.
I felt like the idea of marriage was daunting in that it's lifelong and you have no idea what's going to happen in life. In my childhood, my mom got a brain tumor when I was 12. She was hospitalized. She didn't recognize my dad at one point. If she had died, my dad would have been a single dad of 6 kids. So I saw of a lot of other things that happened, but traumatic things happen to challenge a marriage. And like I mentioned, I have multiple friends currently walking out separations and divorces, and I've been engaged before. We've talked about that. And I really looked at dating like, who am I going to want to grow and change with that would accept me? That I could accept them in all of their change. So I feel like choosing your person every day applies to I think it matters in committed relationships, and I'm not saying it doesn't apply outside of marriage, but choosing marriage for my life, I think what that looks like is you can compare it to, I'm never going to eat bread again. That's so intimidating. I love bread, but bread might make me break out. And so that's incredibly daunting to have a lifestyle change or a relationship lifestyle. And so if instead of thinking about it as I'm never going to eat bread, but would you like bread for the table? In this moment right now, in reality, this is the only decision I have to make. No, thank you. That's it. Today, do I want to choose my person? And choosing, I think, means assuming the best and being authentic in front of them, and anything that would challenge that, right? And a lot of the challenges happen in your mind. Am I going to choose to be vulnerable and say what would really help us? Or am I going to choose selfishly comfort because I don't want to go there. I don't want to have a disagreement. I don't want to have an argument. Or, I've always heard people that not cheat, but get into affairs, right? Like a prolonged relationship on the side. You leave It's like if you're 90% fulfilled in your, I'm going to talk about marriage because I'm married. If you are 90% fulfilled in your marriage, but the other person looks like the 10%, that 10% looks like 100. But then if you leave, it's 10%.
It's 10%. Yeah.
And so if it's a challenge in your mind or a challenge externally, like a person that you could break trust with, cheat on your person with, it's choosing, no, I'm going to choose what's best for not just me, but what's best for my partnership.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like advice for other people, I've never felt more free than being married to Dom because he holds me with open hands. Like we read the traditional vows and one line said to have and to hold. And I think it was this line that he said, I don't have you like a possession, like you're not mine. I like get to be with you. Like we are linked arms. It's not like something as simple as that. His approach was, I don't have you. You're you, and I have the privilege of being with you. And and so when people talk about, oh, I just don't want to settle down, I think it really is, I'm lucky to have found someone that has that approach. But there's this book called The Defining Decade, and it's about your 20s. And I read it when I was 24 and having a quarter life crisis, which was so long ago at this point.
Sure.
But
I know.
If you look at, if you desire marriage with one person and you date toward that, but you're swiping and it's this culture of what if I found this person, but they don't look like what I thought, or they don't have the job, or they don't have the money, or they don't have the family, or they're not living, whatever it is. If you, all of a sudden you go from tons of possibility for your life to just one, and that can feel very restricting.
Yeah.
And I think people get caught up in the history of, right? It's the equity that you've built with someone, and it's, well, I've already invested 4 years with them. I'm going to start over. And to friends that I have that are currently in their 30s, they're like, I just want to find my person. And the encouragement I have is, I would rather be lonely alone than be lonely in a relationship. And if you don't want to get divorced, if you don't want to go through the heart, and if you have kids in the mix and finances and assets, like put all that aside. Okay, so let's say you live till you're 100. Let's say you never eat bread again and you live until you're 100.
Oh, kill me. Yes.
What if you're 35 and you're single for another 15 years, and then you meet the most amazing person and you are happy for 50 years? Or let's say you pass at 75, you're happy for 25. I would so much rather be lonely for 15 and then exuberantly happy for 25 than friends that I have that stay in a relationship that's great. Nothing's wrong. But what they really want is to express themselves in a different way, or to take a risk, and they feel like they can't because their partner doesn't make them feel safe to feel vulnerable, and they don't want to do the hard work for whatever reason looking at it. And so I just want to leave. And so I think people do that at companies a lot too. They don't want to have the conversation about, hey, I want to make more money. They just leave. But what if you had the hard conversation and your boss did, like, what's the best that can happen? I always like to ask that question. But going back to relationships and just choosing every day, I only think that you should choose someone that you can trust to choose, which sounds really simple as I'm saying it. But
no, but I don't think we think of it in that
like
way.
You were in a relationship that you could have stayed in forever. And I have that in my past too. And yet I sit here so incredibly grateful that Dom's not at all what I thought I would choose, right? And he didn't happen to me. I chose him.
Yeah.
But I chose him because I was open to my person looking, being, feeling whatever differently than what I thought. And it's easy to be with him because he lets me be myself. And then I think it's easy for him to be with me because
you're amazing.
Yes, of course.
Because they hit the lottery.
But I think it really is, there's no competition, there's no jealousy, there's no control, because we don't look at it that way.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard for people to look at it that way. It's a muscle you have to grow, I think, because I think we've been conditioned to, she's mine.
Yeah.
He's mine. My outright anniversary post, like, my man. Oh, great. They are yours. But like, but I think something that we find cool is you could leave any day. And we both know that. Like, I think the beauty of marriage is I think it's more than a contract. Like, I think there's something spiritual that happens when you say vows. And so I think it's a covenant. I think it's beyond a contract, but I could go break the contract tomorrow. And he knows that. And I know that. And we don't feel, I think this is it. We don't feel entitled to the person staying. And we don't feel, and I say we because I really feel that way, but I guess I'll talk for myself because it's just me here. I don't take for granted the lifelong commitment. So I don't treat him like shit. And I don't, like, you know, there are moments where I'm like, don't talk to me like that. Like, I'm sensitive right now. Or no, I'm sad. I don't want to go there. Or I don't have the energy. Like, just, it's boundaries. It's what you need and advocating for it. And then the other person respecting it. And I think that's really hard to find.
I like the you don't feel entitled to the other person staying. Because what that means is that you're going to continue to be the best version of yourself. You're going to continue to let them be the best version of themselves. Like, it just kind of...
Like invincible. I don't feel invincible.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it stops you from... It's not... You're not saying like, oh, I could leave at any time. So...
No.
It's more... We don't have to be together. So let's
like, I don't need him.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, you know, you're the damsel in distress and you need a man.
Yeah.
Didn't Frank Sinatra sing "You're nobody unless somebody loves you"? That some song like that.
Sounds like a Frank Sinatra thing.
I was at some restaurant and I was like, okay, hold on a second.
Oh, I know.
What?
I know.
What?
Yeah, different. It was a different time.
So
not our time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just did like an advice episode thing, and I one of the women was talking about, it doesn't matter, but I said the same thing. I was like, you can be just as lonely in a relationship as being lonely not in one. Like, it's I'm saying the exact same thing, but I think, and what I even said on that podcast was, I think sometimes it's easy to justify your loneliness in a relationship because you literally have a person beside you. But if you don't feel like you're growing, if you don't feel like you have chosen that person or they've chosen you or whatever it may be, that loneliness is almost worse because there's a cognitive dissonance with being beside someone and feeling that way. So it's so frustrating. But when you're actually alone, you can kind of sit in it and be with yourself, which is, that's something that I'm working on now.
I know. Are you dating anybody? Okay.
I mean, I'm open.
Your single era.
Listen, I got a podcast.
You have a tattoo I haven't seen before.
I have 2 tattoos.
What is that? What are those?
They're Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Okay. Are they single needle? They look very like...
What?
I don't know.
Is there more than
That's
one
what
needle?
Say.
Oh, I guess because they're thin. Yeah. I guess you would call it single needle.
I'm just like copy and pasting things I've heard. I'm like, oh, thin tattoo. Is that a single needle?
Well, listen, I am not part of the tattoo community quite yet. I think if you get 2 1-inch tattoos, you need more than that. But yeah, they're Egyptian hieroglyphics, and it's essentially, God, I love talking about visual things on a podcast. But it's the Egyptian Ayab, or the heart of Ayab, something like that. It's the Egyptian heart. Which is where the Egyptians believed the soul lived. And this is the feather of Maat, M-A-A-T. And Maat was the goddess of like morality and justice. And she didn't believe in like societal hierarchy. Like everyone, it was just like if you were a good person. So the Egyptians believed that when you died, the gods would cut out your heart, your soul, where your soul lived. And they would weigh it against the goddess's feather, which is which represented all the things that she represented. And if your heart was lighter than the feather, then you got to go to the afterlife. So basically, it was totally based on whether or not you were a good person. It had nothing to do with like your status, how much money you had, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. When did you get those?
A few weeks ago.
Nice.
I don't know. I think I'm a
They're
tattoo
really
girl
pretty.
now.
I have 1 inch tattoo. I can't show you, but it's
What's yours?
5 tally marks for my 5 siblings.
I love a tally mark tattoo.
Yeah. Have you seen them?
I've seen I haven't seen yours though.
Yeah.
Do you guys all have them?
No, we don't. The fun
What?
ones have them. Yes.
How many have them?
3. That's my joke. The fun ones have them.
The fun ones have them.
Yeah.
No,
and
but
if
sure.
any of the 3 that don't have them were here, they'd be like, whatever, Amy.
And that is how
and
I
they would
imagine
say, we
siblings
didn't even agree to this. Like 3 of us
Sure,
said,
sure,
let's
sure.
get a tally mark tattoo. And then we went and got it. And the other 3 were like, what? I didn't agree to that. So it's a joke.
You can't get a siblings tattoo without all
I
siblings'
know.
approval. I get it.
Yeah.
I'm an only child, so I do whatever the fuck I want, and it's beautiful.
There you
It's a
go.
beautiful process.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this has been lovely.
This has been lovely.
I
Thanks
love you.
for
This
having me
was-
on your podcast. I love you too.
This was so great.
Yeah.
Thank
And now
you.
we'll continue the conversation off air.
Yes, we shall.
Okay.